Alrighty, let's jump right on in with our guest speaker tonight. He'll talk a little bit more about what the environment in Texas for business was like and what it is like now. But Texans for Lawsuit Reform has done a lot to make Texas the kind of place where people from all over the country want to move and bring their businesses. Tort reform is huge, and the fact that we have made a lot of progress in that area has been good for all of us. So it's always good to know what this group is doing. They are targeted continually by the left, and it's important for all of us to be aware of the efforts that are going on in support of tort reform, as well as the kinds of things that they are having to deal with. So it should be an interesting talk to file away for future, because this debate never ever ends. So with that, please help me welcome Tim Thompson from Texans for Lawsuit Reform.
Thanks, Julie. Please be seated. 1, 2, 3. You know, I haven't said the Pledge of Allegiance, prayed and sung God Bless America all in a row, maybe ever, and I may start doing that every day. That was very nice. And if that was fantastic. So, and if I bomb in the middle of my speech and I start singing "God Bless America" because Julie wants it to be more from deep, then that's what we'll do. She said that we're a little bit late starting, but since in light of the fact that we have a new baby being born in the UK, it's not and by the way, I read that has nothing to do with England. This new prince is a prince of the United Kingdom, not the Prince of England. I thought that was interesting. But in the words of, I think it was King George VIII to his 5th wife, "I won't keep you long." And since we're starting late, I figure we might as well leave early. No, so thank you very much. My name is Tim Thompson, and I represent Texans for Lawsuit Reform. It is a nonprofit PAC based in Houston. It's been around since 1994. And you say, well, why are you here? The big thing is I'm a volunteer and not a lawyer. I am not a lawyer. So be easy on me in the Q&A period. I have served in public. I guess I've been a public servant twice. I worked for Father and Son Bush up in Washington in both administrations. I was very fortunate to be able to do both. I grew up in Midland, Texas, so that's where they were from, and I just had the opportunity and took it years and years ago to work on the campaign for then Vice President Bush, which took me around the country doing events and whatnot. And then in 2003, I had the opportunity to go back up there and work for George W., and that was a great experience. I right now do global business development for an offshore oil and gas company called T-Rex, and we design and build subsea structures. So that's what I do during the day. But enough about me and about my background. I would like to talk to you a little bit about Texans for Lawsuit Reform. And there are 4 topics I want to hit. A brief history of TLR, and I'm going to say TLR, so just know Texans for Lawsuit. Okay. The brief history of the organization, some of what we've accomplished so far, the economic impact, which Julie mentioned on these reforms that have been put in place in Texas, and then how you can help. There's some cards on your chair, and I'm going to ask you to look at those before we leave this evening. So let me take you back to 1994 when Texas for Lawsuit Reform, or TLR, was founded. Dick Weekly, David Weekly, had read about how bad it was to do business in Texas. In fact, the Wall Street Journal called Texas in an article the lawsuit capital of the world, not even of our country. That was the Wall Street Journal's deal. And 60 Minutes did an investigation asking, is justice for sale in Texas? So these 2 brothers got together and created this organization with the idea of trying to figure out what to do about these frivolous lawsuits and about how to reduce these crazy lawsuits that were going on. Lloyd's of London imposed an insurance surcharge on any company that did business solely in Texas because of the high probability and excessive cost of lawsuits. So that's kind of crazy to think about. That just the added fee. Doctors were retiring early or closing their high-risk practices altogether because of lawsuit abuse. They were leaving the state. The lack of fairness and honesty in our civil justice system was not only blocking economic growth, but destroying public faith in our legal system. So for almost 20 years, we've been able to help pass the most comprehensive package of reforms in the country and turn things around. The great news about all of this tonight is that Texas is a national model for tort reform. People come from around the country, legislators, to study, or they study on maybe not travel, but to learn how to best tackle the problems of lawsuit reform. And let me be clear, I mean, I understand that any of us in this room may find ourselves in court of law, whether we're the plaintiff or defendant, we're suing or being sued. Our goal is always to make sure that there's fairness and balance in the courts, no matter what side you're on. So I just want to make sure that you understand that. So there are two keys to our success. Helping elect dedicated public servants that have become educated on the issues and then having the commitment to cast the votes accordingly. Second is having concerned citizens like yourselves participate in the organization. I understand there are a couple of legislators in the audience. Could you please show, or not legislator, I'm elected official, excuse me. So great, thank you very much for being here. All right, so what has been accomplished to date? So that's a little bit about where we were and why we got started. And I want to give you some milestone kind of years to learn about. So we stopped much of the judge shopping. Y'all ever heard of that, where you can go and oh, this judge is favorable for different types of cases for where the laws allow them to do that. So you could go to any of the 254 counties in Texas and find the judge that might be favorable to you. And so if an accident happened right here in Montgomery County, for instance, you could find yourself trying a case in the Valley or Beaumont or elsewhere. So we now have proportionate responsibility in Texas, which means if you are held responsible, now get this, this is fascinating to me. If you're held, it's going to be mind-blowing, but if you're held responsible for a jury for 15% of the damages, guess what? You can only be required to pay 15% of the damages. Makes a whole lot of sense, right? Instead of being held responsible for 100% of the damages, which you were prior to the law being passed. It's, again, you can't, I guess you can make this stuff up, but it's kind of crazy to think that that's the way it used to be. All right, so a couple of key dates. In 2003, we helped pass medical liability reforms that limit non-economic damages to $750,000 or $250,000 for doctors. The change resulted in a substantial cut in liability insurance costs for doctors, up to 50% in some areas, that stopped the exodus of doctors from our state. So we have now licensed over 20,000 new physicians in the 10 years since this reform was passed. The net increase of doctors represents the opportunity for 2 million more patient visits and over $2.5 billion in direct economic impact. I mean, that is real live stuff. And even if you don't know anything about what I'm talking about, you've heard about Texas being a beacon for business in the last several years. Okay, so that was in 2003. In 2005, TLR helped pass legislation that curtails class action lawsuit abuses. And there's a real famous case you guys probably heard about, Blockbuster. Did anybody hear about that particular class action lawsuit? Where Blockbuster was being sued on behalf of thousands of customers. And we've all probably been to Blockbuster or rented a video, right? When the lawsuit was settled, the lawyers made millions, and the customers got a coupon that allowed you to go get, what, a free video. So we maintain If the class action is paid in coupons, shouldn't the lawyers be paid in coupons also? Huh? Good. Thank you. That'll be. Waiting for that 2 or 3 person applause. So TLR was front and center in helping pass legislation to eliminate one of the most flagrant legal abuses in history, tens of thousands of asbestos-related lawsuits. Y'all remember the commercials that were filed on behalf of the people who were not sick? Thanks to the reforms, an individual can sue only if he or she has been truly impaired, as evidenced by an objective medical exam. Again, kind of like that 15 and 15, makes a lot of sense to me. Importantly, and those who were actually sick got to go to the head of the line. All right, so that's 05. In 07, and so as you know, we meet every couple of years in Texas for legislative sessions. So this is 03, 05, 07. So in 07, we stopped an onslaught of dredging lawsuits that were threatening Texas's critical maritime industry. Some of you may be involved in that. In 09, we saw the most aggressive assault on lawsuit reforms in the history of TLR. So personal injury lawyers had spent nearly $9 million to elect state legislators opposed in legal reform. In some cases, they were successful, unfortunately. In 2010, trial lawyers introduced over 900 bills in the Texas legislature to try to stop these reforms that had already been enacted. You know how long it would take to try to drum up 900 of anything to submit to anybody? These bills contain provisions to create or increase opportunities to sue. In 2011, next session, TLR helped pass several important pieces of legislation, which included the Texas Windstorm Insurance Association reforms. Has anybody heard of the TWIA? It's a state-run agency, and it's really created to help those who cannot afford insurance themselves for hurricanes, and for people who otherwise couldn't get coverage. So personal injury lawyers took in about $56 million from these lawsuits following Hurricane Ike. And so because the TWIA is a state agency and not an insurance company, the cost of the lawsuits had to be borne by the policyholders. So this law reins in lawsuits aimed at the TWIA and provides important customer protections for TWIA policyholders. The law improves transparency, oversight, and governance of TWIA and moves it towards financial solvency. So what changed because of that? One, it established fair and realistic timelines. A claimant must file a claim under the policy not later than the first anniversary date on which the damaged property was done. Sounds fair to me. Establishes a process for appraisal and alternative dispute resolution. Lawsuits against TWA. So if a claimant is not satisfied with the completion of the alternate dispute resolution, or if the resolution is not completed within 60 days, the claimant may file a lawsuit in the county in which the loss occurred. So if a claimant provides by clear and convincing evidence that TWIA mishandled the claim by engaging in intentional conduct, then the claimant may recover double damages, which amount to the equal claimant's covered loss and any consequential damages. So because of support of legislators who are committed to reform and people like you, this became Texas law despite opposition from the trial lawyers who worked around the clock to defeat them. Okay, so what has been the economic impact since since the lawsuit reforms have been put in place? In early 08, TLR commissioned a national recognized economist named Ray Perryman, some of you may have heard of him, to analyze the economic impact of reform in Texas since the inception of the group in 1994. So this is a third party that found out that about $112 billion of annual spending and 500,000 jobs are the direct result of these reforms. So as a country during economic tough times, the Texas economy is performing far better than most states, as I mentioned earlier, and we're seeing the full benefit of the reforms. So more new jobs are created in Texas than any other state right now. And what's crazy to me, and somebody can call me on this, almost 40% of all jobs in our country, in the whole country, are created here in Texas. Now, obviously, we're the largest state in the contiguous, and it makes a lot of sense. But that's a whole lot of new jobs, considering how many millions of people there are in all these other, 49 other states. So, as many of you know, Texas is home to more Fortune 500 companies than any other state, and the CEO Confidence Index has once again named Texas as the best place in the country to do business for the 9th year in a row. So there are no accidents that, if you see where I started my talk, or where we were, and the effect. Now TLR didn't do it by ourselves, right? But it was committed to making these changes to try to get it into a better playing field so people can survive and prosper in the climate that we have now. So, and again, I'm not suggesting, TLR is not suggesting that lawsuit reform is totally responsible for all the strength that we have. There's no doubt it's a solid contributing factor, and TLR has helped balance the scales, and that's all we've been trying to do. So defending lawsuit reform. So what do we do now? It's like, all right, Tim, I know where you've been. It sounds like we've gotten a long way to where we were. And a lot of things have been passed. 03 was the landmark time. So now what do? We have to be vigilant. It's like the guy on the watch, right? It's always, you have to defend your beachhead or your kind of your headquarters, if you will. And so it's essential that we continue to try to keep these personal trial lawyers from going nuts again. They spent over get excited. They spent over $17 million in last year's election cycle to try to defeat these reforms. And they'll continue it. And that's why I'm here. That's why I hope that I can enlist you in your help and some help to continue defending this. So we just want to counter the misinformation promulgated by the trial bar, and we must support our pro-reform legislators and try to help elect pro-reform candidates and find them and go campaign for them. So I have a card here that everybody should have, and if you don't, please let someone other than me know. I don't know where they are, that's the only reason. But this is so what I'd like to do is either get your business card or please ask you to fill this out and give it to me, and we'll get you into our database. Now the big thing about, because you go to churches or you go to other civic clubs or something like this, what are you going to do with my information? First of all, we're never going to ask you for money. So that should be enough for you. You got it, I'll fill it out. We're not going to ask you for money. We will, time to time, educate you or send information out that's pertinent to our particular cause, right? And then at some point you may get called to call on your legislator to help with movement if something happens and we really start getting attacked. Again, what did I say earlier? Not going to ask for money. However, if you feel so led to write a check tonight, I'll make sure it gets to the right person. So we have 17,000 plus grassroots volunteers around the state. So as I mentioned, we'll give you some updates when needed. I invite you to go to the website, which is tortreform.com.
What is it, John?
Okay, make sure. Tortreform.com if you want to learn about what's going on with our group. And you can also sign up for Facebook and Twitter if you'd like more information there. So, in closing, working together can make sure that strong reforms remain in place in Texas and that additional reforms are enacted as needed, and respect for a fair and honest civil justice system is restored. There are plenty of groups that are doing great work in this regard. I'm excited, or I'm happy to be a part of Texans for Lawsuit Reform as we continue to try to stave off just incredibly unbalanced and unfair lawsuits that happen. So, thank you very much for your time. That's it.